we are going to be working obviously off the PowerPoint search for grant money. And so I want to ask everybody, is everyone here from a nonprofit group or looking for money for a nonprofit group? Okay, is anybody looking for an individual or a for-profit enterprise? Oh, okay. Is it for a for-profit business or I'm sorry to put you on the spot. The reason I do this is because the program is really about nonprofits, in that a lot of what goes on here really isn't germane to other things. However, I do help people kind of steer them towards things that are possible for for-profits and individuals. The problem is, unlike what you've heard from people with bad suits on infomercials, there's not a lot of money, there's not outright grant money for a lot of businesses. Okay, it's done in very narrow circumstances. But I can point you, and this class is kind of not going to be real helpful, but there is my phone number, and at the end of the thing, and my email, if you'd like to contact me, I'd be really happy to talk to you. Okay, so we are going to do a program. It's mostly about nonprofit funding. The second half will be Mary Sebecki from the Need More Fund. What's in our grant center? Okay, I said I was from the grant center of the library. What's in there? There are directories of grant makers. Some of them are online, some of them are print. There's a lot of how-to grant writing books, and you can see a sample of them over on that table. There are also books on other forms of fundraising besides grants. Quickie quiz, does anybody know what percentage of money comes from grants for nonprofits in this country? A guess. How much percentage of nonprofit money comes from grants?
80%.
Oh no, try 20%. Yeah, that's your first heartbreaking piece of information. About 20% of the money that nonprofits in this country get is from grants. The other 80% is from individuals. Most of it is from individuals. So a lot of your fundraising for grants or for nonprofits will have to deal with fundraising from individuals too. And we have a lot of books on that. We have books on nonprofit management. We have books on how to light a fire underneath your board. We have books on how to do bylaws, how to run meetings, how to start nonprofit groups. We have a lot of things that will cover fundraising and management of nonprofits from soup to nuts. We try not to keep it too esoteric, but there's a broad range of materials on personnel and so forth. And we invite you to look at the Grant Center and see what kind of material we have there. Meanwhile, all of these books are available for checkout. Okay, now we get to the grants part of the program. Before you think about doing your research, you want to think about your program. For one thing, I'm going to say it's the thing that will strike you as dumb or offensive or whatever, but one of the things you have to think of when you're thinking about funding a program for a nonprofit is, do you need a grant? And is it a cost-effective way of getting money for what you want? I have a confession to make right here. The dumbest thing I ever did in my life was get a grant from the state of Ohio. And the reason is because it was a very small grant from the Arts Council of Ohio. And I can figure out that with the hours that I put into it and the paperwork I put into it and the amount of money they eventually cut me, it would have been about as cost effective for me to mow lawns for that money. So when you are looking at really small amounts of money or you're looking at a government source, one of the things is you have to think of is a grant a cost-effective way of doing this? If it's a really small amount of money, could you ask individual donors? If you are looking for a gift in kind, for instance, one lady came to this thing and said, well, I want 12 backpacks for a group outing that we're doing. And we said, no. Maybe what you want to do is go to a sporting store and have them donate it and maybe put their name or logo on the backpacks. as a consideration. Think, especially if you're thinking in small ways, is a grant a good cost-effective way of doing what you want to do? Also, are you looking for public funding, meaning the government? Are you looking for private funding, or both, or anything short of bank robbery? If this will shape your strategy for where you look for the money. Okay. What will you do with the money? And this is important because a lot of funders will restrict their funding by the type of usage they have. When we look at some of the sources we look at, one of the things that we'll say is we do not give for certain types of funding. We do not give for operating expenses. So you have to think, what is the money going to be used for? And that's a really important thing. Another is, if it is an ongoing program, if you're going to keep it going, what are you going to do when the current funding runs out? How are you going to replace it? Okay. And gee, I'll write you another grant is not necessarily the answer. A lot of funders do not want you to be their only source of money. They also do not generally fund you into perpetuity. So you have to really consider, what are you going, and your donor wants that too. You owe it to the clients that you serve, you owe it to your donors, you owe it to your employees to think ahead, how are you going to get money after this grant runs out? And you have to know, and I'm going to say a real dull thing here, you have to know what you want. A lady came in here once and said, I would like $1 million for Eastern Europe. And I asked her nosy questions, such as I will ask every one of you if you come and interview with me. And she said, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I would just like $1 million. And I thought, lady, so would I. You have to really have an idea of what it is you want to do with the money, what kind of plan do you have for the money, because your funders are in business for a reason. They want to accomplish things just like you do. And they want to know that you have a plan and that your plan is a workable one and that you are the kind of person who's going to make that come to fruition. Okay? And where do we go looking for money? What do we do? One of the places that people look is private foundations. When you think of the Ford Foundation, the Stranahan Foundation, these are what are called private foundations. They originate from one source of money. They usually have some geographic limits. One of the big reasons that grant proposals are turned down is because they're sent to the wrong people. 2 out of 3 private foundations have some kind of geographic limitation on their giving. They only give to Ohio, or they only give to Northeast Ohio, or Northwest Ohio. So you have to be aware of those geographic limitations before you get serious about asking them for money. Another is that they put out a 990PF form. Has anybody ever looked at those? Okay, some of you are nodding. Some of you have used that. A 990PF is the tax form that they send to the IRS. And it is every bit as juicy and boring as your own. It has lots of boring things about where they invest, but it has a lot of good information about where they have given money in a particular fiscal year. And by where, I mean geographically where and what kind of organizations they gave it to and how much money they gave. And that is a really huge source of information. And now because of the internet, it's a very easy thing that you can access from your home or office. And we're going to tell you how to look at that. When you are looking through sources for a private foundation, and you're looking at the information they provide, and we're going to show you an interactive search, there are 5 big selection criteria that you can use. One is subject matter. Do they fund for the things that you fund for, that you are trying to do? Okay, if you're doing programming for children, do they fund for that? Do they have an interest in that? If you're funding for geriatrics, is that their interest? Okay, geography, as I said, 2 out of 3 limit their funding by some kind of geographic limit. Are you inside of their geographic limit? Are you in the possibility? You know, when they say they give nationally, do you really see a national trend in their giving? The type of organization, do they give to groups that are like you? Okay. Do they, if you are a small grassroots organization, is that where they like to give money? If you are doing funding for something controversial, like pro or anti-abortion, do they fund for that kind of thing? Or do they not, or do they choose very safe things? You want to have somebody that wants to fund in what you're doing. Christianity is a good example. Do they give to local Christian groups? Do they give to Christian missionary groups? Do they give to Roman Catholic groups? Do they give to evangelical groups? See that there's a good fit between what they're trying to do with their money and what you're trying to do with your organization. Also, the amount of money. You may not get money all from one funder for a project, but you want to make sure you're asking for an appropriate amount of money. And you're going to look at the size of the grants that they have given to see what is the appropriate amount that you want to ask for. Obviously, if their total giving is $10,000 a year, you're not going to ask them for $7,000 because you're not going to wipe them out. You want to ask for something that's in line with the kind of gifts they usually get. And again, how is the money going to be spent? Is it going to be spent for operating your organization, for seed money for a particular project? What is it you're going to do with the money, and do they ever give for that kind of subject? One of the great things that we have here at the library is the Foundation Directory Online. Does anybody use that? It's awesome. And you're going to see a demonstration of it, and better than that, you are going to have one-day free access for all of today. I'm going to give you a password and a website that you can use the Foundation Directory Online at your home and office all day long today. And then, like Cinderella, it will just poof away. But the Foundation Directory Online is wonderful. It has over 90,000 private funding foundations. And it is online. And what you do is you create searches that to find funders with certain parameters. And we're going to do a sample of that during this demonstration. But I always suggest that when people search on the Foundation Directory Online, that they do a couple different searches, that they do them with different parameters. And also, how many of you are in Northwest Ohio? Okay, make them nice and broad in your subject heading, because frankly, this is not a gold mine for grants. There's not, I mean, you'll get bitter and jealous if you look at how many grantors are in places like Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati. I mean, they just have a lot more grantors, and also places like New York City or Los Angeles. So sometimes people will come up and say, well, I'm doing this project, and they pick the narrowest little subject heading they can do, and it's like, no, don't do that, because you'll come up with zero. What you want to do is do a nice broad one, and then pick a local subject area. If you're choosing geographically national, then you can go with a narrow subject heading, if that makes sense. I'll show you more about this. But you want to do a couple different searches and look at the results and see what it is that, how on target your searches are becoming. And then you can redo your parameters. If there's something wrong, you can narrow them, you can broaden them. But do a couple different kinds. Also, another thing about Foundation Directory is that even though there's only one location where you do this at the library, you can bring your flash drive and download the results to a flash drive. I tell everybody that the flash drive is their friend. Do rough searching, download the results to your flash drive, take them home, put up, a cup of coffee or any kind of beverage you would like, and put your feet up and search and look through the results.